Welcome back to Direct Station, where politics and planets collide and converge. I am Kate Carey. Today we'll talk about the cosmic timing that might make your breath catch. Today we'll talk about these raids and protests and the quarrel between the world's two most powerful men. And we'll see how much more sense it all makes when we look at the sky. For those just tuning in, around here we track what's happening with the humans and wonder about what's brewing in the sky to try to make some meaning of it all. This is for people who don't usually pay attention to the astrology, or people who don't usually pay attention to the news for mental health reasons or any other reason. But I'm trying to be a bridge between these two worlds and hopefully a source for both headlines and astrological context. Today, I want to dive into the events of this past week, where the truth shows up as a character in multiple timelines, crashing the party in some shocking ways. And the planets reveal who the real uninvited guests actually are. I promise, even though we're walking into some dark territory, we won't stay there. We're going to find our way to expand our consciousness, to act, to practice in such a way that we can sustain ourselves and the people we love through this national nightmare and to the other side. Come with me. So first, let's set the scene. This week gave us two stories that might seem unrelated, but are actually cosmic twins. On June 5th and 6th, we witnessed very public, very emotional breakup between Donald Trump and Elon Musk. All the political podcasts and news sources are saying it's over, that Trump has more power now, but honestly, I'm not convinced. That's the whole story. What struck me most about it was how it played out. Musk's mounting expression of displeasure with the bill, Trump's disappointment and subterfuge, Musk's assertion that Trump won the election because of him and that he's in the Epstein files, meaning he's a pedophile, that I single-handedly got elected. Trump's threat to cancel all of Musk's contracts, and finally Elon's threat to decommission spaceships that bring NASA astronauts to and from space. Elon also, I think, called for Trump's impeachment. Anywho, the thing de-escalated a bit over the next few days. It does look now today like Musk is promoting Trump again online. Cooler heads seem to have prevailed for a moment. But we have to remember he is an addict, and that, I have to assume, would rear its head again. The stars certainly make it look so. But either way, the relationship for now remains kind of this unsettling and unsettled dynamic in this messy, erratic duo where secrets, lies, money, and raw power poke at each other, and in my opinion, remain to be seen. Then the action shifts from Washington, D.C. to Los Angeles on the night of Jan 6th. ICE was carrying out increasingly cruel raids in LA at a garment district warehouse, then at an elementary school graduation, if you can fucking imagine. Think about that for a minute. Children celebrating their achievements, their families gathering in joy, everybody's got their best clothes on, and federal agents disrupting the moment of hope and accomplishment. Emotions in the community rose fast. Neighbors gathered. Multiple standoffs with federal agents ensued. And late Sunday, I should also say, there were plenty of bad actors who sort of came to the party once the party had begun. So there were people who were burning driverless taxis, and there were people, anarchists, there were anarchists involved. So that did happen, that did occur. And Fox News enjoyed that aspect of it, as did the president. Anyway, by late Saturday, Trump had federalized the National Guard and sent them into the streets of Los Angeles as if it's Moscow in the 90s or Tiananmen Square in 89. Historically, when American presidents have federalized the National Guard against the governor's wishes, it has been to protect civil rights and expand freedom. Like in Little Rock in 57, or Arkansas in 60 or 65, when President Johnson overruled Alabama's governor to protect voting rights marchers from Selma to Montgomery. But Trump's federalization against California's governor's wishes represents a reversal of this legacy, deploying military force not to protect constitutional rights, to enforce immigration raids that separate families and communities. The crowds were not violent, And this felt like Trump wanting to declare war on his own people using the Guard. All those lieutenants, Stephen Miller, J.D. Vance, are online barking like junkyard dogs, threatening and declaring and puffing up their chests. Both stories are about unwelcome truth tellers, both the Musk Trump fight and what went down in LA this weekend. They're both about unwelcome truth tellers and unwelcome people disrupting carefully constructed power dynamics. And the planets, they are practically screaming about what's really happening here. So as you may have noticed, our calm between storms has passed. We are in for another ride through July. Although there's much more buoyancy and support available than there was in March and April. The planetary weather last week was extraordinary. It explains both the explosive communications and the shocking escalation that we're witnessing. First, we have the key players in this phase of things. These are the slower moving guys affecting things deeply for a longer period of time. So the sort of seasonal weather, if you will. And the big news there is a square between Jupiter, Mr. Expansion, and three folks hanging out together back in Eris, the skyline that saw so much action in March and April. So hanging around in Eris and squaring the guy who grows everything. We have a very near conjunction, meaning same place, same time, between Neptune, Saturn, and Ceres. These guys set the stage for everything that happens. The main themes to keep in mind are borders, boundaries, social change, upheaval, transition, truth and lies. When Neptune, Mr. Whatever, and Saturn, Mr. I'll tell you whatever, are hanging out together a lot right now through next February, and much more intensely come July. But it started. The weather that they're causing together has started. When it's spring, it starts to get warmer. Things start to move up and down, and there's a rogue snow day once in a while, once in a blue moon, right? But the mood generally shifts once it's spring. The mood shifts towards like warmer things unfurling, blossoming things, right? So the seasonal planetary weather for this time is all of that change and justice being confronted, harmful truths coming to light. That's the mood. That's the season. That's the big picture story that we are going to come back to time and time again. So now enter fascinating weekly, quicker weather, like a quick storm that moves through and moves out, right? That, in my humble opinion, explains what unfolded last week between our president and our oligarch. So let's do that first, since it came first. First, we have Mercury, the two-spirit planet of communication, information. So this is a Mercury story. And for the duration of this story, Jupiter and Mercury are close to or in exact conjunction, meaning in the exact same degree and minute in the arc of our sky. So on Earth, it looks like they conjoin. They're, of course, rather far away from each other, but to us, it's a conjunction. And when planets join up like that, it's a big deal. So Jupiter's role in this story is to make everything bigger. Jupiter is expansion. So Mercury, made bigger and more potent by Jupiter, is making a sextile to Mars, the planet of conflict and action. So vocab word, sextile, is a 60-degree angle that implies an opportunity for confluence. So Mercury sextiling Mars creates this flowing energy between words and warfare. Mercury is words, Mars is warfare. Between strategic communication in Mercury and aggressive action in Mars. It's the aspect of war rooms or battle plans, of messages that cut like knives. We saw this in Musk's willingness to divulge secrets, and we see it in the administration's coordinated rhetoric justifying unprecedented federal overreach. And the Jupiter effect gives both events this carried away tone. This tone of exaggeration and half-truths inside these wars of words. So tolerate me making this a little more complicated today than I usually do. I usually pick a character or two and we dive deeply. But today I've got to tell you about the party that was happening. And a lot of the folks came and went. So I'm going to mention a bunch of players, including one or two that I'm mentioning for the first time. And I do that not to assume you have your little notebooks out and you're keeping track of who's who, but really much more to just paint a picture of the clusterfuck that happened in the sky last week. So you have Chiron. Chiron is an asteroid or a dwarf planet, but he's a really big deal. He is the wounded healer. So he tends to open us, reopen, heal, make meaning of old wounds, turning them into wisdom eventually, but certainly not always right away. But I could look at your chart and ask you questions about the specific aspect of your life where Chiron is sitting, and we would see that your healing journey in this lifetime has already begun, has resolved, or is begging for attention. Chiron just does that wherever he hangs out. So he hangs out until we're ready to face those shadows. And when he's there, he kind of makes his presence known, right? So with Chiron, we have a conjunction with another new name, which is Eris. Eris is an asteroid and a dwarf planet. Eris is the goddess of discord, the uninvited guest who crashes the party and reveals uncomfortable truths. She is Mars' rabble-rousing sister, right? Meaning the god of war's sister, right? So this fiery, action-oriented force, but feminine this time, right? So when Eris wasn't invited to a wedding, she threw a golden apple inscribed for the fairest into the celebration, causing chaos that eventually led to the Trojan War. She's the truth teller who disrupts false harmony. You getting it yet? Chiron conjunct Eris is about initiating healing through uncomfortable truth-telling. It's about old wounds being forced to the surface so they can finally be addressed. In this case, of course, though, the relationship to Mercury is again a sextile, which is an opportunity, not a guarantee. So there's an opportunity to heal through a rift, but it's not necessarily always taken. So this dance right here, first and foremost, easily explains the Musk-Trump toddler fight. Mercury, words; Mars, combat; Eris, disrupt; Chiron, overdo wounds; Jupiter, over the top. I almost made one of those emergency episodes last week because I was so excited to tell you guys, but my life isn't really built like that yet, so I couldn't. And anyway, I told myself they'll be excited next week too. So let's think about the other situation and what unfolded in the sky over the weekend, because it might actually even be more mind-blowing. Another newish player is Ceres. She's the mother of all asteroids. She's Demeter, Aphrodite's mom. Remember we talked about her a bit last week. She got Taylor, aka Mother, to her fans up and running, right? So Ceres, the fierce mother who represents nurturing, motherhood, and homeland, is on the move, out of a conjunction that she's been in with Neptune through a good chunk of May. So she's moving out of that close proximity. Neptune, as you may remember, for the past 14 years, has been dissolving boundaries and creating illusions and allowing for powerful delusional dreams, almost like spells, in the dreamy water of Pisces. And then Neptune, you'll remember, packed his bags and moved in to a new skyland lately. So he's now in that Eris skyland where action, boundaries, change is much more likely. So Ceres separating from Neptune and Eris means a bit of a fog is clearing. And that clarity can bring about tangible conflict between parties regarding whose land is whose, who gets to be nurtured by this land, who gets to call it home. So Ceres is waking up and asking, where should the lines be drawn then? And Saturn, Mr. I've got a giant pen, I can draw those lines real easy for you. So Ceres, mother, land; Neptune, illusions, dreams, lies even; and Saturn, boundaries, firmness. So a lot of us are emerging from the fog of illusion into this stark clarity when the lines are being drawn right through the middle of LA. And don't forget how Mars, combat, and Mercury, words, are part of the picture as well. Because if this was anything, it was a weekend war of words and posturing, much more than a war that leveraged all the weapons being waved around by the administration. God, they're a pack of loose tweens, aren't they? All of this is happening as Neptune, that planet of dreams, illusion, and disillusion, is taking its first steps into Aries after 14 years in Pisces. So we're transitioning from an era of dreamy justifications and kind of illusions of manifest destiny into an era of direct action, of piercing truth, a war for the truth, and certainly real strife over borders. When Saturn and Neptune are in the sky, you see a lot of what, and they're in the sky together. If you go back through history, which we'll do that later, but if you go back through history, you see a lot of borders changing. So there's conflict over borders, over who gets to live where, right? So, guys, or as my niece would say, in a moment like this, bro. Here's where the cosmic synchronicity becomes kind of staggering. The Treaty of Guadalupe Hidalgo was signed on February 2nd, 1848, exactly 177 years ago. This treaty ended the Mexican-American War and forced Mexico to cede 55% of its territory to the United States, including all of present-day California, Nevada, Utah, New Mexico, most of Arizona and Colorado, and parts of several other states. Mexico also had to recognize the Rio Grande as the border with Texas. The U.S. paid Mexico $15 million, roughly $500 million in today's money, for land that's now worth trillions. The president was Polk. There's all this talk about manifest destiny, right? Like the white man was told by God to push his empire to the edge of the continent, no matter who it hurt. Sound familiar? So he starts a fucking war with Mexico, which ends with Mexico's more or less surrender and the dramatic redrawing of national boundaries. But here's the poetry. On February 2nd, 1848, the day the treaty is signed, Mercury is exactly opposite Jupiter. So not conjunct as they are today, but exactly opposite and deeply affecting each other, right? So exploding important words, having massive effect, right? You also have, on that same day, Saturn and Neptune coming out of a conjunction. So they had been in an exact conjunction about a year earlier, but they're still well inside something called orb, new vocab word, which means they're still close enough to each other. They're within 15 degrees of each other in the circle. They are therefore, they're 12 degrees apart on this day. So they are therefore still deeply, deeply affecting each other. So we have that, and the war for the boundary for the border had been going on for this entire time, right? So Saturn and Neptune clashing meant Mexico and America were clashing. And the thing is resolved as Neptune and Saturn grew apart, of course. But on that day, Mercury is opposite Jupiter. And another powerful aspect between these two planets are so active on the 8th, when the National Guard is deployed, the same cosmic megaphone of grand proclamations about territory, about belonging. Even more extraordinary, though, on that same day in 1848, Neptune is conjunct Eris, as Neptune is entering the Pisces skyland for the first time in 165 years. Think about this. Eris, the uninvited truth teller, is crashing the party right as Neptune is beginning its journey through the realm of dreams and illusions, the place he just left now. So this conjunction launches and extends the dream of manifest destiny, which carried on for the 14 years of following 1848, right? Like this was an idea that carried on and expanded, totally disrupting the lives of everyone who lived on that land. Today I live in Mexico. Tomorrow I live in the United States, where I am unwelcome. 177 years of territorial expansion justified through increasingly disconnected from reality narratives about the divine right and American exceptionalism and who's supposed to live where. We are just so thoroughly coping with all of our original sins right now. Okay, so stay with me. Today, in 2025, we have Chiron, the guy who opens old wounds to heal them. Conjunct Eris, the disruptor, the gal who throws the apple into the party, causes the war, right? As Neptune is finally, for our cycle, our lifetime, leaving Pisces, that land of lies and delusion, misinformation, and entering Eris, the skyland of courage, leadership, strong, fiery spirit affecting everybody. The truth teller is back, but this time she's bringing healing rather than just rabble for rabble's sake, upending life. She's walking into the party with Chiron, the wounded healer. This time, the era of manifest destiny, dreams, delusions is ending. And we are being forced to reckon with the wounds that those dreams created as this president behaves baldly, as if some more than others belong on that same fucking land. And listen, the dream is still mighty. The lie is still mighty. And a good chunk of Americans are here for it, for this violent removal of everyday people contributing to society through taxes and community and work. But many of us are watching this unfold, watching a city where a third of the residents were not born on this side of the border react strongly to the purposefully provocative, disruptive force of Ceres, Mother, and Eris, troublemaker. So the raids happening in Los Angeles and territories we literally took from Mexico through this treaty in this unbelievably parallel day are not just cruel policy. They are the death throes of a 177-year-old delusion about who belongs where and who gets to decide. I submit to you that Chiron's presence in this and the fact that a lot of what's happening is unfurling in the skyland of new beginnings, we are seeing the beginning of the very end of a very old, very, very, very worn out song. The loud words, the threats, all the puffed up chests, all the exaggerations, they're transparent. Anyone watching can see what this is and what it isn't. We do need to wake everybody else up from the spell they're under, and we will. But we have a ton of promise in the sky that it can break before we're through here. So what does all this cosmic weather actually mean for how we navigate this? First, let's understand that living through the end of a massive historical cycle is no picnic, right? Newsflash. The Neptune and Pisces era that began in 2011 gave us collective immersion in fantasy, illusion, spiritual bypassing. Think about how much we've escaped into streaming services, social media, echo chambers, conspiracy theories, and the numbed out orientation to other people's suffering, right? But Neptune entering Aries means we're transitioning into an era where those escapist tendencies collide with an impulse that's about direct action. The fog is lifting, sometimes really brutally, and we're being forced to see things as they actually are, rather than as we have dreamed them to be. Like, is your awareness of the magnitude and absurdity of the problem with immigration and status and labor in this country growing by the hour? Mine is too. Chiron conjunct Eris tells us this revelation is going to hurt before it heals. That's how it works. It is also telling us that it will heal. The wounds around displacement, belonging, who gets to call themselves an invited guest in this land, are being forced to the surface. Hell, even Elon's status is in question now, if you listen to Steve Bannon. This isn't punishment, it's surgery. Sometimes you have to cut into old injuries to clean them out so that they can finally heal properly. The Mercury aspects are showing us that this is a time of strategic communication becoming part of the warfare, but also of truth-telling that has the power to shift everything. The challenge is learning to distinguish between truth that heals and truth that merely wounds, and the lies that are still so prevalent. We now have to learn the difference between revelation that leads to justice and pronouncement that just creates chaos. We have an opportunity as a society to learn that distinction now. Here's what I'm seeing in the deeper patterns. We're being given a choice. The old dream of manifest destiny, of borders that can be moved around people as if they're chess pieces, of some human beings being more invited than others, that dream is dying. That question is whether we're going to cling to its death throes or midwife the birth of something more whole, more fair, more full of love and prosperity. And for Christ's sake, the notion of sharing the Mexican flags in those LA protests, that's not just resistance, that's an assertion, a pride, a righteousness, a declaration of a right to be here. That's people saying, we were here before your borders existed and we'll be here after they're gone. The communities forming protective circles around children at graduations, around restaurant workers, around garment factory staff, that's the new dream being born. The dream of radical hospitality, of belonging based on humanity rather than paperwork. So I want to share what's coming through for me about this moment, because I think there's a spiritual assignment here that goes beyond politics. We're being asked to hold two truths simultaneously, both the horror of what's happening and the inevitability of what is emerging. The rates are real. The trauma is real. The terror in these communities is real. And also, this is how empires end, not with clean transitions, but with desperate attempts to maintain illusions that are already dissolving. Your job, our job, isn't to fix this or stop this, or even to not be affected by it. Our job is to stay awake to what's being revealed without letting it break us, to build the spiritual stamina for conscious witnessing, to practice being the kind of people who can offer sanctuary when sanctuary is needed and appropriate. Your definition of appropriate may be different than mine. It might be farther to the left and it might be farther to the right. The point is for us to come into some kind of practice that is focused around love and care and sharing and safety. The planets are showing that this is a threshold moment. We're crossing from one era into another, from one understanding of belonging into something we haven't seen before, right? It wasn't done before Trump was reelected, right? Like we have this, we can get this delusion that like, it's just him, he's just causing it. No, guys, he's manifesting all of our disease, all of our imperfections. He's bringing them to the surface so that they can be released. Threshold moments are always chaotic, always painful, always require us to release things we thought we needed to survive. But they're also moments of tremendous generative potential. The future is being decided right now, not by the people with the most power, by the people with the most vision, the most love, the most willingness to stay present to both the breakdown and the breakthrough. What in the world will our Project 2028 be? And when will we start writing it down? Gloria Anzaldua, the Chicana theorist and poet, described the US-Mexico border in terms that feel prophetic for this moment. In her groundbreaking work, Borderlands, La Frontera, she wrote, "The US-Mexican border is an open wound where the third world grates against the first and bleeds. Before a scab forms, it hemorrhages again, the lifeblood of two worlds merging to form a third country, a border culture." Anzaldua was writing about the physical border, but she was also writing about all the borders between different people, the psychological, spiritual, cultural boundaries that determine who gets to belong where. What she understood is that borders aren't just lines on maps, they're wounds in the earth and in our collective psyche that keep hemorrhaging until we address the original trauma that created them. And about that hemorrhage that I know you feel in your psyche as much as I do, she said. The struggle is inner. Chicana, Indio, American Indian, Mojado, Mexicano, immigrant Latino, Anglo in power, working class Anglo, Black, Asian. Our psyches resemble the border towns and are populated by the same people, she says. The struggle has always been inner and is played out in outer terrains. Awareness of our situation must come before inner changes, which in turn come before changes in society. Nothing happens in the real world unless it first happens in the images in our heads. Gloria Anzaldua. And completely related, if you'll allow, Hannah Arendt, writing in The Origins of Totalitarianism about the conditions that enable authoritarianism, observed how people become what she called superfluous, existing in contradiction to the principle of equality before the law. She wrote, "The clearer the proof of a state's inability to treat stateless people as legal persons, and the greater the extension of arbitrary rule by police decree, the more difficult it is for states to resist the temptation to deprive all citizens of legal status and rule them with an impotent, not impotent, and to rule them with an omnipotent police." Arendt was writing about the 1930s and 40s, but her words are urgent now. When some people are deemed superfluous, when arbitrary rule becomes normalized, when the state treats entire populations as problems to be managed and removed, rather than people to be protected and cared for, these become the conditions where authoritarianism can take root and grow. Both writers understood that the question of who belongs where isn't just political, it is spiritual, it is psychological, it is existential. It gets to the heart of what we think human beings owe each other, what home means, what sanctuary looks like in practice. So where does this leave us? What can we actually do with this information besides feeling overwhelmed or scared or helpless? First, an action we can take. Practice radical hospitality in your own sphere. Create spaces, however small, where people belong without conditions. This might mean learning someone's immigration story, not as voyeurism, but as relationship building. It might mean supporting organizations doing direct legal aid rather than street protests. It might mean examining your own assumptions about who deserves to feel safe and why. It might be signing up to teach an English class for refugees in your town, or helping to distribute information in a neighborhood that could use it. Y'all, this moment of migration is not going to end. It is going to expand. It is going to get more severe. Politics in Europe, politics all over the world are currently being driven by this question. State cruelty is becoming normalized all over the world, because so many bodies are on the move, because the industrialized nations have made it impossible to live in so many places. There has got to be a loving way that involves sharing resources, sharing what's left of this planet, being kind to other humans who have bodies that are as vulnerable and in need as our own. Take your growing awareness of this problem. Take your growing consciousness of the reality of the situation, and use your own time, use your own body, use your own power, use your own privilege to help, to show that it's not all Americans who want to meet you with physical harm and cruelty, who want to threaten you, who want to use stern voices and put your body where it doesn't belong. Use your own self to help in this moment. Second, a practice for your own spiritual health. Build stamina for conscious witnessing without numbing. When you encounter cruelty or injustice, probably typically online, although more and more likely we're seeing it in the street, wherever we live, whether in the news or in your own community. Stop and breathe into your reaction. Root yourself in what you know to be true about human dignity. Ask yourself, how can I stay awake to this without breaking? I'm not talking about doom scrolling. I'm not talking about doing this over and over and over and over and over for an hour. Witness present, witness present, witness present, right? Like, I'm not suggesting that kind of attack on your nervous system. I'm really not. What I'm suggesting is pick one. How can I stay awake to the suffering I'm witnessing in this image, in this video, in this article? How can I build strength rather than just despair? How can I practice my own sense of belonging so that I am able to offer some kind of sanctuary to others? To what and whom do you belong? Revel in that for a moment. Notice how it feels in your body to feel a part of something, anything. A group, a family, a neighborhood, a union, a friend group, an acting troupe, I don't know, a bowling league. You're not bowling alone. What makes you feel like who and where makes you feel like you belong? Go find it, breathe it in, right? And then exhale that sense of belonging, of being loved, of being seen and accepted for who you are. Exhale that sense of safety, sending it out to those who might need it. Inhale just a small piece of their heart. Relieve them of just the slightest bit of the energetic pressure, and exhale your own belonging, your own safety, your own sense of home. If body's up there, move bodies down here. So then, can your human form cause an energetic shift others experience? I'm sorry, I just really believe that it's true. Listen, Masha Gessen, who I feel like I'm quoting weekly now because their writing is so prescient. Their latest piece is a stark warning about how brains are wired to adjust to shock after shock, to normalize what should never be normal. They call it beautiful that we have this ability to assimilate the previously unimaginable. It's part of what makes us so resilient, right? But like any good defense mechanism, this one has its dangers. So work against that assimilation, is what I'm saying, with a practice of witnessing on purpose the stuff that comes across your screen. When one particular person is haunting you all day, you read some article, you saw some video, someone told you a story, and that person is just stuck in the back of your head, and you keep imagining what happened to them. You keep imagining where they are now. You keep imagining how it must feel. Send them some love and safety, and take on some of the terror. Your body is a filter capable of doing this. Trust me, try it. I'm not saying overwhelm yourself and be in a constant state of outrage or despair. I'm saying we can be healthy, we can be sustainable, we can find a middle path, staying awake without staying enraged, building consciousness without building bitterness. And if you try this and it ends up triggering you, that is Chiron whispering. Yeah. That is Chiron. The wounded healer saying, guys, maybe this time we process that chip of the trauma. Maybe this time we work through that memory so that it can be released. I'm not saying alone. I am saying with help. As someone who has spent 30 years in trauma treatment, I am here to assert that it is deeply valuable. But I'm saying you can't walk around with the compartments forever, right? And maybe, just maybe, the moment for your own wound into wisdom experience is being provoked by the bodies up there and the bodies down here. Remember that healing happens in relationship, right? Not in isolation. The cosmic weather is intense right now, but it's also creating unprecedented opportunities for connectivity with other humans, for breakthrough, for collective healing, for individual healing, for new forms of belonging that we haven't been able to imagine before. Finally, I want to leave you with an inspiration. I want to close today with a few quick words from Marcelo Hernandez Castillo, a poet who was born in Mexico and crossed the border with his family when he was 5 years old. He writes in a poem called Origin of Drowning or Crossing the Rio Bravo. I'm going to read you the beginning of it and the end of it. He starts with, "We don't even remember what we look like anymore. Down here, everything is wrapped in cloth and tied with yarn. The light inching through the swell, our backs glossy as tooth dipped in honey. Sometimes I want to climb down a tree in secret. I want to stand in front of a crowd and whisper a speech in secret. If they can kiss you, they can kill you." It's a beautiful long poem, and it ends with this: "Be still, our children will come. If you happen to come across someone, and if they ask, say, he's just playing dead. And then you'll believe it yourself, and will light a candle for me. Nothing will convince you that prayer is a removal of self-distancing. Let's continue this drowning to remember what we look like. Let's keep walking underwater until one of us gets it right. Go ahead. Sharpen yourself against these rocks. Dress me in all your wet clothes." What moves me most about his work is how it transforms the experience of being unwelcome into the practice of offering welcome, how it turns the wound of not belonging into the gift of helping others belong, how it takes the trauma of invisibility and makes it into a superpower of witness, of truth, of healing. That's what this cosmic moment is asking of all of us, I think. Not to fix the brokenness or to pretend it doesn't exist, but to transform our own experiences of not quite belonging into medicine. For others who are crossing their own threshold of invisibility all around us. The border is not just a line between countries. It is every place where one world meets another, where one way of being encounters a different way of being, where what we've known bumps up against what we're becoming. And every single one of us are living on some kind of border right now, learning to see more clearly after being forced to witness the realities of what is all around us every day, and increasingly more dangerous. Our consciousness is shifting. Do you feel it? Honor it, feed it. Notice how much more you can see. Notice how much more you can hear. Notice how much more you can say. If you want to understand how these patterns are affecting you, it would be my great honor to look into it with you. I offer readings that help you navigate your unique relationships with these energies and your unique assignment during this threshold moment. My email is in the episode description. Until next time, remember that the planets are weather. The skies are right for the activity of healing, for the activity of redefining, belonging, of acting bravely and with great strength to upend an old and stubborn regime that has finally peaked as one giant pimple that is near to bursting. How we navigate that weather, how we dress appropriately for it, and how we explode the delusion speaks somehow more effectively into the void, how we decide, as so many communities are, to pick a single person worth fighting for. We get to choose who weathers the storm, who we shovel that driveway with, what tools we use to clear the debris, how we choose to respond to the thresholds we're crossing. That remains our sacred choice, each of us. Until next time, be well, be conscious, and be kind. I'll see you soon.